Hello, what we're going to be talking about in this video is how you can go ahead and create your own constructors for your classes. So up to this point, we've been using the default constructor that Java provides us when we've created our new objects. But you can go ahead and define your own constructors. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and update the fan in the fan tester classes by adding two constructors to the fan class. We're going to have a no-R constructor that creates a default fan. And we're going to set the instance variables. Default speed will be slow, on will be set to false, radius will be set to 5, and color will be set to blue. And then we're going to create a second constructor that sets all the instance variables to values passed in by the user. And the signature of the constructor, this constructor, should be fan, and then a string. The speed would be the first variable passed in, on would be the second parameter, radius would be the third, and color will be the fourth. So as I mentioned, when we created our fan class, when we were using the default constructor that Java provides. And when a fan object is created using that default constructor, then the instance variables get set to the Java defaults for each one of the data types. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in and create our own default no-R constructor, but we're going to go ahead and set the defaults to defaults that we want for each one of our instance variables. So let me just go ahead. So after my instance variables, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and define my constructor. So it would be public. And then the constructor name matches the name of the class. So in this case, it'll be fan. And this is going to be a no-R constructor, so we're not passing any arguments into the constructor. And then what we're going to do when this constructor gets called is we're going to set each one of the instance variables to their default. So we're going to set speed equal to slow. And we're going to set on equals to false. And we're going to go ahead and set radius equals to 5. And then finally we're going to set color equals to blue. Okay, so that's our no-R constructor. So what we're going to do next is we're going to create a constructor where we're going to pass in values for all four of our instance variables. So again, it would be public, and then the name of the constructor would be fan, and the signature now is going to be the first parameter that we're going to pass in is a string, and it's going to be for the speed. Second parameter passed or argument passed in will be Boolean, and that'll be the value for on. And then it will be a double, and that will be for our radius. And then finally it'll be a string, and that will be for the color. So that is our signature for our constructor. So basically what Java is able to tell, depending upon what constructor, when you create your object, it knows if you're passing in variables, it'll call this second constructor. And if you're not passing in any arguments or parameters, it'll call the first constructor. So what we need to do here is we need to go ahead and set each one of our instance variables equal to the value that gets passed in. And when the values or the name of your arguments in the constructor call matches the instance variables, then you need to preface this dot speed so it knows that it that you want to set the instance variable for this object equal to the speed value that gets passed in. So that's how Java is able to distinguish between parameter and instance variables with the same names. So the next one will just be this dot on equals to on, this dot radius equals to radius, and this dot color equals to color. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and then add in information or comments regarding both of our constructors. Okay, so now if we go ahead and take a look at our fan class, what I've done is I've just gone ahead and added the comments related to each one of our constructors. So we have a no-R constructor that set speed to slow, on to false, radius to 5, and color to blue. And then we have a constructor that sets all the instance variables to values passed in by the user. So what we've done is now we've defined our two constructors. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go into our fan test class and we're going to go ahead and test both of those constructors. So if I go in and click on my fan test class, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and add my test methods or my test, create my objects up above here. So what I'm going to do first is I am going to go ahead and create and display a default fan. Okay, so in order to use that constructor, what we need to do is we need to go ahead and specify the data type. So it's going to be a fan data type. The name of my object is going to be a default fan, and that'll equal to, and then what we need to use next is the new keyword because we're creating a new fan object. So I'll just go ahead and then specify fan with no arguments getting passed in. So now what should happen is this should call our fan.java class, and it'll go ahead and call that first constructor where each one of the instance variables gets set to the defaults that we went ahead and we set in our fan class. So let's go back into our test program. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and display the information. So I'm just going to copy and paste how we displayed the information from our previous testing. And then I need to go in and change some information in here. So it's default fan. And then now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be calling each one of the get variable or get methods using the name of our default fan. So it will be default fan for each one of our method calls. So let me go in and change fan1 to default fan. See if I updated them all, one, color, radius, and then is on. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and systemout.println a blank line in my output. So now what we need to do is we need to test our second constructor. So we're going to create and display a user-defined fan. Okay, so again, we're going to go ahead and specify fan, and what we're going to call it is user fan, and we need to do, it's going to be a new fan object. But what we're going to do is we're going to pass in values for each one of our of our instance variables. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass in medium for the speed, true for if it's on or off, 22.5 for the radius, and silver for the color. So again, when you go ahead and you create your constructor, the parameters that you specify must match the parameter or the constructor signature. So in our constructor, if we look at our fan class, basically what we're passing in the speed first, on, radius, and color. So we need to make sure we pass in those instance variables in the same order when we call the constructor. So we've called it right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste the rest of the information to go ahead and display our fan. And okay, so it'll be a user fan. And I'll go ahead and change default to user. Okay, so we should be ready to go to run the program. So again, I need to be in my tester class to run it. So what I will do is I will go ahead and compile my files. And if I compile from the actual tester class, the tester JGrass knows enough that it needs to also compile our fan class if it has not already been compiled. So I've compiled it. I'll go ahead and run it. So now if we look, our default fan speed is slow, color is blue, radius is 5, and the fan is off. Our user-defined fan, we have medium, color is silver, radius is 22.5, and the fan is on. So what we did in this video, instead of using the default constructor that Java provides, we went into our fan class and we created our own user-defined constructors. The first one was the NOR constructor, where we passed in, set each one of the instance variables to the default values, and the second constructor, basically what we did is we created a fan based on all of the user passing in all of the arguments that the instance variable should get set to. So that's all I had for this video.